have to talk about verbal viruses. When we can get this out of our speech, what are the verbal viruses?
Like, so,
Yes, like, oh, some. Those are popular ones. And a verbal virus could be anything you bring to your speech that doesn't belong there. There's also nonverbal verbal viruses. When sometimes people will do a little before talking. I call this meeting to discuss, or a little lip smack. It's just a behavior that we put in place that became habit, that clutters up our messaging, and we don't need it. Verbal viruses absolutely destroys the quality of your messaging. It makes it confusing when you have to listen to a bunch of ums, likes, so's. It's so cluttering. It'll be lovely to get them out. Here is the cure for verbal viruses. I want you to keep your own tally. We can't shape this behavior out of our speech until we are aware of how much we do it. When you go to a meeting and you have your clipboard or your papers, your folders, you're on the phone, have a Post-it note. I want you to do this for the next 2 weeks. For the next 2 weeks, do a Post-it note, put today's date, and don't discard them for at least 2 weeks because you're going to see them lessen. But whenever you do if you don't mind, give yourself a tick mark. So I call this meeting to discuss. Give yourself a tick mark because you didn't need that there. What's amazing, I'm absolutely convinced that following through on that tick mark, after a period of time, your awareness is going to be increased and that behavior will be shaped out. Tallying is very important. My clients are funny. I had one client, Mary Jane, she called me one morning. She said, oh, Miss Liz, guess how many tick marks I have? I said, how many? She goes, 45. I said, that's outstanding. She goes, I've only been at work for 2 hours. But it shows you how much you clutter your messaging. Verbal viruses is mostly a problem when it's at the beginning of a statement. So I called this meeting. I would like to share, I have something to add. It's this little hiccup that we put in front of our messaging. We might do it because we don't want to be too abrasive or come across as too strong. So we put this noise that's not needed there for some reason. But we do this behaviorally. And it's really mostly a problem at the beginning of a statement. Speech and voice will never, ever be perfect. It's not possible. Speech is a fine motor skill, so we're going to trip over our words. Our thought mechanism and our speech mechanism are moving at the same time. It will never be perfect. And if you're explaining a story where you're starting off and then you want to add another thought and there's an in the middle, that's not the biggest issue. That only if you do it all of the time. The bigger part of the verbal virus problem is when you do it at the beginning of every statement. And when we can get that out, your messaging is going to be really clear when you can say what you want to say and not put so if you all wouldn't mind, we don't need that. If you all wouldn't mind, I would like for you to. Boom, right? Much, much, much cleaner. Now, my clients are funny. When we do presentation training, they'll get up here and they'll just feel like, man, I can't say my next sentence without a so. If you are in agony because you're realizing that you use a lot of these viruses, and I had to work on this too because I'm very high energy, say it in your thought bubble. If you are in agony to say your verbal virus, say, I called this meeting to discuss. After a while, that's going to get old and your awareness is going to be sharper, and then you will be able to start off your sentence much more fluidly. And your messaging is going to be clean, and that's going to make you more persuasive. Now, the staircase also helps with minimizing verbal viruses. Because if you're the type who talks really fast, and I want to tell you all about it, you just kind of get those ums, like, so's, because you're just talking so fast, your thoughts and your speech mechanism aren't in sync, and so the ums and the so's, everything's just so cluttered here. By speaking nice and controlled, up and down the staircase is another strategy to have thoughts and speech in nicer alignment and not get all of those cluttering words. If you're not sure if you use a lot of verbal viruses or you want to get some of those shaped out, When you're in meetings, I would get a nice trusted friend for support and have them track them and do a little post-it note. But with the post-it note activity, I want you to do for a couple of weeks and save your post-it notes, because 10 days into it, you will have considerably fewer tick marks. And then that'll be very empowering to go, wow, I am really changing my behaviors here. I also want to mention that we don't have to treat the word so like an F-bomb. Because some of my clients think, oh, I can never say so. I can't say so. It's a verbal virus. Well, that was a verbal virus that got overused, because so is an actual transition term. I called this meeting by Friday, so by next month we can do X, Y, and Z. That was an appropriate use of the word so that was not done as a virus, that transition two thoughts together. But we don't need a hyper transition. We certainly don't need it at the beginning. Let's not say something that we wouldn't write. We're not going to write, so I called this meeting, right? So let's be mindful of that, and let's get that out of our speech at the beginning of our statements. And then now you all have the cure for verbal viruses.